Welcome to Kenyatta's Talent Hunt. Our host, Kenyatta Uzzell, founder and CEO of Polyhire, talks with business leaders about what has elevated their careers. Polyhire has a long-standing track record of successfully recruiting top professionals to enhance the quality of life for all citizens, constituents, and customers. Kenyatta's Talent Hunt does a deep dive into how candidates reach the top of the selection process, examining everything from their education and backgrounds to their work experience and personal style. Kenyatta's guests share key and compelling aspects of their career climbs and give listeners an intimate peek behind the curtain of what it takes to create a leader. Kenyatta's Talent Hunt starts now.
Hello, and welcome to Kenyatta's Talent Hunt, a show about leadership for leaders and those who want to learn more about what it takes to be a great leader. I'm Kenyatta Uzzell, founder of Polyhire, a national search firm that specializes in recruitment of individuals with a passion for service. One of the most fulfilling roles that one can have is service to others. On our show today, we're joined by a lifelong servant, a bridge builder, educator, and author of the book, This Is My Story, This Is My Song, one man's journey to turning oppositions into opportunities and fulfilling his unique gifts. Dr. Willie Clemons grew up during the Jim Crow era in Mobile, Alabama, and attributes his family, his village, and love in shaping who he is today. I'm excited. I'm honored to spend time with him today. Willie, thank you for joining me and my listeners.
Well, it's a pleasure. I look forward to this, and thanks for inviting me as well.
Sure. I believe you were born in 1940. That's a year before Emmett Till was born. Am I right? Is that correct? 1940, thereabouts?
I was born in 1940.
Okay.
Correct.
Great. Now, how aware were you as a kid knowing that it meant to be what it meant to be raised in the Jim Crow South?
It was a part of our family structure. It was a part of that constituted a village, a community where that was unique and different, but it was a place that we recognize that had great value, and certainly one that helped shape us to being the sort of individuals that we are. We knew that there were differences as we looked at our surrounding communities, which we were not a part of and not allowed to be a part of. But we also had a sense of being able to thrive in the midst of all of this. And so at that early age and being in that particular community and recognizing that was what sort of gave me the knowledge that these kinds of things exist, but it's not to prevent us from thriving and reaching our goals.
You had a strong support system. You speak fondly of your neighborhood, Chickasaw Terrace.
That's
there in
correct.
Mobile. When did your noticing of a difference, when did that turn into activism? And again, I go back to, and I thought it was relevant that you grew up right around the time that Emmett Till was growing up and seeing what happened. All of this shapes your life. So can you tell us a little bit about that support system and going through some of those experiences of what it was like to be an African-American male growing up in Mobile during that time?
Well, I start off by saying that the community was, and specifically the church, was the focus of the community. And through that helped to shape our characters, our values, it helped to determine who we are. Again, based upon the circumstances that was a part of our community. We knew that there were, for lack of a better terms, restrictions over things that we were confined to do and limited in doing, but that sort of helped to shape us as it relates to working together and forcing unity that's here. Given that, it prepared us to deal with oppositions and many, many challenges. You mentioned Emmett Till, that although Emmett Till lived in Chicago, but his family, just as most of us, was deep rooted in the South, and he would come and spend summers there. Didn't know him, didn't know anything about him, and he was in Mississippi, which, as you know, this is right next to Alabama,
Sure.
and not that far away, but didn't really realize the impact of his death would have certainly on my life until that happened and how it had happened. Say the restrictions and the limitations that we grew up with. Emmett was not so much being in Chicago and then being there. So that what happened with him, he sort of looked at something what may be normal to him that was certainly a restriction from his environment that he was currently in. And as a result, he paid a big penalty for that, of just looking very hard at a white woman and all. And that was forbidden, just like forbidden fruit for us. So as a result of that, the penalty was death, and that impacted us in our particular community. So that was just one of many instances that happened there that so helped us to grow and to shape and to determine where we are. And we saw that as an opposition. And one last thing, just mention as another, what really happened right at our doorstep. My wife, Leteria, is from Mobile as well. And although in our families, we went to the same church. And although I'm 6 years older than she is, she was not a part of my relationship at that point. But the family, we were all a part of the overall community as a result to the church. Well, her family's home, because her father was very politically involved, the cross was burned in front of them, and they had to crawl through the window and all of that to get out to be saved. And so here again, these were the sorts of things that we were confronted with during that Jim Crow area, during that particular South. And how did we take these and to use those as the oppositions there to help shape who we are today?
And your family, you speak fondly in your book of your grandparents, I believe, who raised you. Talk about how your papa, I believe, is how you refer to your grandfather.
Papa.
Papa, okay.
Papa.
Talk about his influence and the influence of your extended family, your church family. You obviously relied heavily on your faith and your spiritual upbringing and that sense of community and village, hence the name probably of This Is My Story, This Is My Song, title of your book. Can you speak to his influence and your family and extended family's influence on who you are?
Well, yes. I was raised by my grandfather. My grandmother died when I was 9 years old. He was my first role model. He was my mentor, and I look to him and credit him for helping to shape my life in terms of the life that he lived. He was a deacon in the church. We had a very puritanical family. I mean, that was it. Church every Sunday from sunup to sundown. And so that was the core of our community, that and the school. And so my grandparents were very, very much involved in both of those and in our particular lives. How did I get to be raised by my grandparents as opposed to my parents? I knew my father, but my father was not a part of my life at all. And my mother, who at the time, as you may know, if you look at history, when there was the Black migration to the north, my mother left to find bigger opportunities that's there. My grandparents would not allow her to take me with her as a single mom and all of that. So I then was with them along with aunts and the community as such who helped raise me. So that's how that all shaped up. And as I said, my grandfather was very much involved. He was a lot of who I am. I am a people-oriented person. I'm one who is engaged. I connect. I give back. I am involved in aspects with that whole, my mantra is to whom much is given, much more is required. That came from my grandfather and the life that he lives. And then moving on from the other part of what I do and what I say is strengthening communities by helping those in need. That's who he was. That's what he did. And so that legacy was continued through me. It had such an impact on my life. And so what you're seeing now that's in my book, is an extension of who he was and all of the contributions that he made. He was involved in the civil rights issues during that time, and life was threatened. And I mean, they lived under very, very dire circumstances there. On one end, we lived in fear, in the sense of the fear of the police or the Ku Klux Klans and that particular group. But the other part, we had the faith that no matter what the circumstances are, that we will definitely survive. And that's what has brought me where I am to today. And as I say, that faith, family, and friends are some of the core of what I do and who I am.
Absolutely great. So when did your sense of activism, you're telling us where it's rooted. We see that in your grandfather and your community. When did you catch that bug, that spirit? What triggered that in you?
When I went to college, well, even prior to that, I've always been engaged and involved. Elementary, high school, even more so. That has been who I am. Very visible, connecting, have lots of friends, relationships involved, and so forth. So that's the basics of who I am. But at that point, didn't really understand, as I look back today of now, until I went to college. Certainly went to Montgomery, Alabama, and I was there during the whole civil rights movement. I was there with Dr. King. When I got to Montgomery, it was the finishing up of the Rosa Parks and that demonstration, and Martin Luther King was still there. So I became very actively involved at that point in recognizing that there's some bigger things that could be impactful that I could be engaged with to help make a difference and improve the quality of life and to do those things. And so that was the beginning of my involvement. And at that point, we were working toward a cause, which was our civil rights. And so there was the demonstrations and all of those kinds of things that definitely happened. And that started that process for me. And once graduating and then coming back home to live and to work and started teaching, it began to continue on and began to expand very much, not only to beginning of my professional years and my teaching and all of that, but it really became even more pronounced as I matured spiritually, matured all of that, began to have the family. And moving to Atlanta 50 years ago changed that whole dynamic for me, because it gave me that opportunity to fully participate with the shaping of the city, but also the country, with the leaders that were there at this point. The Andy Youngs, the John Lewises, the Maynard Jacksons, the Coretta Scott King, and the list goes on, as you could very well know. So that's helped to expand, starting from the beginning up to this particular point.
Great. What do you think is different now when you look at where we are in 2024 at this moment in time, and those that are of my or the working generation? What do you think is different? Do you see a difference in where you all were in the 60s and where we are now, and the engagement and activism?
I think that what happened, yes and no, and let me qualify that. We rallied around a particular cause, and that cause was for civil and human rights. which gave us the incentive to definitely become more engaged and to see the impact and to make a difference in terms of our lives. And you could see the result of that, today. We're beneficiaries of that, standing on the shoulders of all of those that have gone ahead and the sacrifices that were made and putting all of that together. And so I was a part of that. My children were not, in the sense, because we were busy really trying to make a better way of life for you guys and ensure that your family's the same things. And so we were trying to protect you from that. So you really grew up in an environment, while you know that there was racism and some of that, but it was not as pronounced. And certainly that we sat back and allowed situations to happen. So my daughters were not exposed to the very blunt sorts of things. They went to school. I didn't go to an integrated school in high school and in college. My first experience of really going in an integrated setting was to graduate school.
Wow.
When I went to Indiana University, and that was that. So I didn't have that experience. My daughters had that experience. And so they saw those situations, and you as a part of that as well, from a different set of lens. What is happening now is a recreation of what happened during that particular time in terms of racism. And now that you guys are beginning to really, really experience this from an overtly particular situation, I think that the problem is we really didn't prepare you for it. And so what we had was the community as a support to deal with the challenges when we had our challenges that we all face. We had a support system there that was the church and the school there. We were raised by the community. I got reprimanded by my neighbor, the teacher, and then got another reprimand, and I got, the spanking, the beating, whatever it is. All of that was a part of the community that helped shape me. That you guys did not have that particular experience. So while we faced those challenges, we had a support system that doesn't exist for the generation now. So what has happened as a result, you have such an increase in drugs, in suicides. As you know, Black folks did not commit suicide when I was growing up, but now it's over 100 and some odd percent where that is happening. Violence, gun violence, high school dropout, teenage pregnancy, all of those sorts of ills that exist today, there's very little support system there. And so that when opposition comes, that's what you turn to. So what my book and what many of us now are trying to get to happen is to kind of reobject, okay, this is how we dealt with situations. We know that things have changed, but racism is still there. It is still alive. How are you coping with that? And so putting systems in place to address these particular issues is what my book and what many of us who are, say, the senior of us who have the wisdom and have gone down the particular road are needing or wanting to impart at this particular point. And this is what I see as a difference here, Kenyatta.
That is, wow, you led me right into what I was wondering is how we move forward. Civility, it's just broken down. We don't even know how to speak to each other. You turn the television on and you're flabbergasted at things you hear and see. As a society, just trying to dialogue, it doesn't take place. And we've got to find the path forward. And you have a blueprint. Your book is phenomenal. I've read it. And if you haven't, please pick it up. This is my story. This is my song. Tell us a little bit more about how do we move forward? What is next?
It's in terms of the things that we do and what you are doing. And let me take my hat off and congratulate you in saying that you are an example of what we have been working and striving for. My focus is certainly legacy and passing the torch, and especially to that has been one of the key things that has happened to me in my professional life. How do I mentor the young Kenyattas and others who are starting out in their particular careers, just as someone did for me? As I said, my family was a working class family. My grandfather just had a third and fourth grade education. My mother graduated from high school. I only had an aunt who had graduated from college and who was also was a mentor to me and was a teacher. And that maybe was one of the reasons why I went into that particular profession. But all in all, coming from very, very humble beginnings, but that was a part of my experience. I think that the key here for us is, how are we communicating? Do we really, really communicate the need for us to come together, say as Black men, to have these kinds of conversations and to take ownership? The thing that is supposed to happen, we pretty much operated in silo. We have been programmed that this is the role that a Black male must play, so we don't share, who we are, with others. We keep things to ourselves, that we get together and around sports activities or socials, but in terms of us really, really getting engaged in our communities as such, and then making a difference and the impact, pretty similar to say what my grandfather and my role models and those guys who worked very, very, very hard on their jobs, but they were intricately involved in the community and shaping the community, addressing the particular needs as such. And so I think that at the end of the day, that moving forward, we have to take ownership of our lives, our particular communities. We have to have those heart-wrenching, communications as here. And I think one of the things that's just happened that I have not seen in 50 years or so, the movement that took place 2 or 3 nights ago in terms of 53,000 Black men coming together to address this issue in terms of support of a Black woman running for president, but also in that is one aspect, but also saving our democracy. That's what we have to do in working together. And as a result of that, as you very well know, within 2 or 3 hours or so, we had raised almost $2 million. And that's the kind of thing that we have to do. We have to take ownership of this as we look at the Black males, as we look at our prison systems and who is there. We look at our schools, we look at the gun violence, we look at all of these, the teenage pregnancy, we look at all of that. What are we doing to address these particular problems? As say, in this case, I'm speaking in terms of Black men. That's the key. And I think that we're now going to have to come out of our perceived power and influence and begin to look at life from a different set of lens, in the sense that what legacy are we leaving here for our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren at this particular point? And also come to realize that we are not immune just because we have wealth and we've had these particular positions. We're not immune from this. I remember Tyler Perry saying that here I am, a billionaire, and I'm still being pulled over by the police and searched and all of these kinds of things. And still experience. I understand, that Oprah and all the people that we say talk about this, but we have to come together to work in collectively. So My charge is in terms of I'm a member, say, of three male organizations. Certainly the 100 Black Men of America, one of the founding members of the 100 Black Men of Atlanta. The oldest and I know you're going to not agree with this, the oldest and the best fraternity in the I know that is going to be a sore note for
You're
you.
my guest, so I'll let
You'll
you
let me slide on that
let
one.
you slide with that one.
But yeah, in
Alpha Phi
terms of
Alpha, yes.
Alpha, we have to take ownership here and begin to move the needle. And that's sort of what we did during the 50s and the 60s when you had the guy. So that was a center focus. And I think that what has this thing that's motivated us the other night here, we have to have some causes to rally, but we can't stop there. We have to continue. We have to get involved. We have to make sure that it is not all about us, but we have our families that is also looking to us for leadership and leaving legacies as well. What sort of legacy will you leave your two children? What sort of legacy am I leaving my two daughters? And I think that we have to move from thinking that, oh, if I give them a financial situation, that's fine. I think that what the expectation is, the legacy that has left us, we didn't have I wasn't left a financial, but I would left a legacy that will continue on regardless to whether I'm rich or whether I'm poor. And that was established by my grandfather, those men in the church that were day laborers who worked and dedicated their lives, all of that built, shaped character and values and spirituality, all of that are the sorts of things that I think is very, very key for us to continue to survive.
Great, thank you. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear how mentorship plays such a major role in one's professional and personal development. More from Dr. Willie Clemons, author of This Is My Story, This Is My Song.
You are listening to Kenyatta's Talent Hunt, where business leaders share their experiences and lessons learned in their personal and professional journeys. Now back to Kenyatta's Talent Hunt.
Welcome back to Kenyatta's Talent Hunt. I'm Kenyatta Azell, and my guest is Willie Clemons, influencer, bridge builder, and author of the new book, This Is My Story, This Is My Song. Willie, you tell in your book a story about a young man who was persistent and sought you out to mentor him. Mentorship is important, and I believe that many, and actually most successful people will tell you that. Who did you consider a mentor or mentors, and how has that impacted your life of service?
My mentor was, in addition to my grandfather, which I mentioned to you, but the external was Dr. Gaines Thompson. Gaines was a very prominent dentist in Mobile during the 40s and the 50s. His family was also prominent in the sense there were very few or very limited. That his father was a physician, and his mother was the first African American pharmacist in the state of Alabama. So he came with a very rich history and was very, very instrumental in being exposed to a different quality of life that I was not. And so it was just by chance that I had an opportunity to meet him based upon the things that I was engaged in high school. He then took me under his wing and began to expose me to a lot of things that did not exist. First, Gaines set the social standard in Mobile, and without digressing and going into anything, Mobile, and especially in the Black community there was what Jerry Majors called the Black bourgeois. And I mean, that's not to say we grew up in that environment. Mobile is a very Catholic oriented city. That was a part of it. And it was a caste, a social class, even from the brown bag test, the light complected blacks and all of that. And we go into another story there. But my point was that Gaines was a part of that, what they call society. And then one of the things that he did, he mentored those of us who come from different backgrounds and experiences, and then began to expose us to a final way of life. I learned a lot from him in terms of when to use all of the social graces, and let me put it that way, to use a knife, to fork the table, all of that, the appropriate things to wear, the black tie. In our community, I wore tuxedos in high school but tails for social events. I was a part of our culture. He was very instrumental in shaping me in terms of that, but also gave me certain battles of wisdom and knowledge, when to do this and so forth, how to deal in various kinds of situations, both social. And I, again, patterned my life like what you see pretty much with me is a result of him.
Mentorship is a two-way street. The person being the mentee must be willing, and the mentor must have time and make time. Talk about how a person seeking a mentor, when is someone ready? There are a number, and I ask that question because there are a number of rising leaders in America who don't know how to identify or reach out to someone for them to be a mentor. Again, in your book, you speak of a young man who met you a couple times and actually showed up on your doorstep to say, I really, I've got you now. I really need your support in learning more. Talk about what it takes. What does it take for someone who is aspiring to continue to grow to find that mentor, the right mentor?
Yeah, I think it sort of goes back to the basics in terms of where it all begins. And if you look at say that was John Grant and the other young guys that were there, were brought up in families pretty similar to mine, but wanted a better way of life, but didn't know how to get there. I think that becomes the desire. I'm wanting to do something different. I have a goal. I have a vision on my life, but I don't know how to get there. And so the key is looking for ways to try to make that happen. I think that what happened, and I mentioned this in my book, and I use John Grant as an example, was what he saw was someone that he said to me, who seemed to be the center of things, something look, it seems as though he has the connections, he's everywhere, blah, 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 blah. And I really want to that. And he felt comfortable enough to be there and with his friends and my family member, which was a part of it, saw that as a particular opportunity that's there. I think that what has to happen, how do you build that, the desire to want to be able to, how do you really begin to look at how can I turn oppositions into opportunities, which is a part of the title of my book. And so I think it's something that is not, here is a cookie cut way to happen. It has to happen in many instances spontaneously. It's something that that sort of triggers me to do that. And this is why, again, that the endorsers, and certainly with me and the publisher of my book, are pushing this to get into the schools and to the hands of students, with the hope that this could give them some incentive to begin to look at life from a different set of lens. Here's someone who went through the same sets of challenges and experiences and all of that that I'm going through. As I tell people, I didn't have a father as such. My biological father was not in my life. And someone said, "Oh my God, because I didn't have that a father doesn't mean that I cannot be successful or thrive to here and there." So I think again, as I said, for me, of getting going into the communities, into the schools where the young are in the students, for lack of a better term, starting at an early age, and hopefully with my presence and my involvement, out of that would come of inspiring, being somewhat of an inspiration, that they will become, out of that would come the Kamala Harris.
Sure.
You see, the Barack Obamas, the Kenyattas, and all of that based
Sure.
upon the inspiration that's there. So that's how I see that happen. And what we have to do is to push to make that happen. Uh, um, and I see this as a particular situation here, and that's why I was glad that you are finding more of my peers, and I use this as my book is something is saying it from the endorsers here. No, this you all need to put this in it. You don't know what impact that this may have to create the next wave of leaders, or giving people the opportunity to see these kinds of things. I think that from a mentoring perspective is fine. So if one sees this as a way, they will take the approach that the Johns and the ones and the Hendricks and all of those guys did, of looking for someone to help them during this particular process.
Wonderful. If there were three things that you would want to tell a young person that has aspirations of becoming a leader of a city, a police department, a company, corporation, what would they be?
I think this is in terms of starting with faith, starting with the acceptance in terms of who they are, of really lighting, developing that comfort zone, that confidence. I tell the people, the young people today, to be strong and courageous, not to be afraid and to be discouraged. That comes from Proverbs 1:9. And I think that sends the message here that no matter what you are, of having that self-confidence, and having that faith that will definitely get you through the process, regardless to what challenges and obstacles that you have. And then the other is family. If you begin to look at that, what is the family, which is the core here? How do that becomes, regardless to what your family may be, the support system, the strong things. And then the other is one's character and their values. And all of this is that helps shapes them to become the leaders that they do. And obviously, the educational process and all that's going through that comes with it. But I think in terms of really accepting who they are rather than their circumstances. And I think that what happens again is that for some reason, and it's even more prevalent now in terms of what is happening, is that our history is being relegated to the back of the bus. Our programs, our civil and human rights programs are being dismantled. All of these things that are happening. So it's preventing the message of hope and inspiration and innocency and all of that to get to this generation here, to let them know that no matter what their circumstances are, that they can still achieve and be successful. So I think that in saying this to them, of giving them that hope, giving them the strength, no matter what their circumstances are, that they could definitely move forward. Because if they look at the history of us as a people, many of them come from the same environments that they have been a part of it, and they've been successful. If you hear the John Lewis's story, you hear all these guys' stories full of civil rights leaders and all of that, and you begin to peel the onion, many of them come from the same sort of environment that they are a part of. How did they manage to go and to deal and to be successful? So we have to begin to show them, to give them that sense of hope, or letting them know that they can be if their vision is to be a police chief, if their vision is to be a mayor, if their vision is to be X, Y, and Z, that can be realized. And here are some things that one has to do in order to reach that particular goal.
There's a quote in the foreword of your book: "Your actions matter. They matter when they take place locally, in your community, and in your family," for example. They also matter, though, when applied in a broader platform like politics or business. Now more than ever, the need for Black voices in all conversations is critical, as is our participation to offer meaningful solutions and lobby for the equity and social justice in our communities. Talk about that quote.
It's really invaluable. I think that if we are going to definitely make this world a better place, that there has to be these kinds of conversations and opportunities that's involved. Your actions matter. I don't think that we no longer can rest on our laurels, or feel comfortable with the fact that we have achieved a level of success, whether we say, quote, we can drive or the Mercedes or the Bentley, or we have 5,000 square feet of living space, we can travel all over the world, we can do all this sorts of situations, which is great. No one is denying that. But there's the expectations of being much, much more, of being engaged, of our voices to be heard here, to be more engaged in the decision-making process that is going to impact our lives, to be at the table there as a part of, not to sit back and allow things to happen that impact our communities just because we're living a quality of life as it is. How can we reach back and make others have that same quality of life as well? And as I said before, if you begin to peel the onion, if you go back to humble beginnings of most of us, many of us come from very kind of the same situations that exist today. As I tell you, I didn't wake up and become Dr. Willie Clemons overnight. It doesn't work that way. It was the struggle, went through the challenges, and went through all that, and that's what you see in the book. So when we talk about actions, that's what I'm talking about. How can we, still coming back again, as professional Black men, make a difference and an impact in our particular community? Something that we could be very, very proud of, that we have changed the lives, we've impacted others. We're having something that our children can point to and say, my grandfather or my father or my uncle and all of that did that. They open up doors of opportunities for us. I think that an example, Joe Biden will go down as one of the most best presidents. I think that an example, Joe Biden will go down as one of the most best presidents that existed with the short time that he was in the presidency, not by what he said, but what he did. And that speaks volume, and that will leave legacies, and the impact and all of this of making a difference here. That's the model from my perspective that we need to live by, and especially those of us that are professional men. We need to be just as actively involved in creating these opportunities and things and giving actions and so forth, and making sure that the next wave of leader passing the torch, and that I'm a strong proponent of that. How can I pass the torch on to others yet to come? So that's how I see this in terms of from an action perspective of certainly making a difference in our communities.
Before we close, I have 5 rapid fire questions that I like to ask. And you can give me a brief answer because these questions could lead to long conversations, but I want to see if I can and drill down and see how quickly.
Okay.
So, the first, what are 3 non-negotiable behaviors that you and the people around you should buy into?
Faith, family, character, and values.
Wonderful. If you could go back to any moment in your life, what would it be and why?
Connecting with my life partner, my wife, Leteria, who I say all the time is the best thing that ever happened to me. That was the moment that connection there. We've been partners for 55 years. And
Congratulations.
And the moment that began, that is what I would say was be something, it's once of a lifetime experience for me.
Sounds like a song. What advice would you give a teenage Willie Clemons?
I mentioned that earlier, and I still say to be strong and courageous, and don't be afraid and discouraged, but to have the faith and the trust in God. That the spiritual piece that has been a part of our culture has to be continued. That is the thing that has gotten us through. But that would be the advice. How do we turn oppositions into opportunity? And the love and family are the things that I would say that I would give the advice to a teenager.
I think I know the answer to this, but how important is legacy to you?
Extremely important. I live by that. Passing the torch to me is significant. I think that's what I was made to do, is to definitely keep the legacy going. And that's what I firmly believe in.
Finally, what keeps you up at night?
God speaking to me, reflecting, listening, charting the next path. That and reflecting on my life and listening to what's next and how can I make a difference and an impact in the lives of others. That keeps me up. If you had asked that question 25 years ago, I would say what keeps me up is the social, the parties and all of that, planning, doing all of those things, getting ready for this, hanging out and all of that. That has changed. And so that's the thing. And as a result of that, and it goes back to what I said in the beginning, how faith and family and all of that has been an integral part of my life.
Dr. Clemons, thank you so much for spending time with me today. Thank you for your service. It was an honor to talk to you, sit down and listen and hear from you. I'd also like to thank our listeners, each and every one of them. Thank you for joining us today. You can follow Kenyatta's Talent Hunt on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you're listening right now.
You've been listening to Kenyatta's Talent Hunt with our host, Kenyatta Uzzell, founder and CEO of PolyHire. We'll see you next time on Kenyatta's Talent Hunt.